Charleston, South Carolina, November 8, 1860, the night the nation voted for Abraham Lincoln, the night the Whitlock plantation burned from the inside out. They said the fire started from a cigar. They said it was an accident, a careless ember, a burst of smoke, a gentleman's hand gone limp. But those who lived near the ash swore otherwise. They swore they heard humming, a slave's voice beneath the crackle of flame. When the sun rose, the master's body was found in his parlor chair, skin charred, mouth twisted into a grin, and 7 cigars lined neatly across his chest. The only man missing was Benjamin, a slave who'd never been seen nor spoken of again. The papers buried it under the chaos of secession. But whispers lingered, of a man who made smoke into judgment, and of a curse that followed every Whitlock heir who dared light a cigar after dark. Tonight we reopen the record, and this time, the smoke won't stay quiet before the fire. The Whitlock estate was a monument to control. Columns white as bone, corridors heavy with portraits of men who believed God's hand wrote their names in history. The master, Edmund Whitlock, was a decorated veteran of the Mexican War. His temper was legend, his charm rehearsed. He collected fine cigars like relics, claiming each was rolled from honest Cuban soil untouched by savage hands. But in truth, every leaf was packed by the slaves he owned. Among them was Benjamin, quiet and deliberate, the one who tended the drying sheds, who touched each tobacco leaf as though it could feel pain. Benjamin rarely spoke. Some said he couldn't, others said he chose not to. Yet each time Whitlock lit a cigar, Benjamin's eyes followed the smoke as if reading scripture. In the fall of 1860, Whitlock hosted gatherings to discuss the preservation of Southern order. Servants stood in the shadows unseen, and from those shadows Benjamin listened, as Whitlock promised to crush rebellion before it began. That winter, the rebellion did begin, but not the one he expected. Benjamin's quarters stood beside the smokehouse, a low wooden building that always reeked of salt and ash. At night he stayed awake long after the others slept, his eyes fixed on the rafters where dried leaves hung like corpses. He kept a small tin box beneath the floorboards. Inside it, tobacco dust, a button, and a fragment of parchment bearing the faint image of a serpent eating its tail. Ouroboros, though he did not know the name. Whitlock had brought the parchment from Cuba years earlier, part of a shipment stolen from a Spanish chapel. The slaves said it carried a curse, the smoke of the serpent. They called it a spirit that devoured its own master. When Benjamin's mother was sold south, she whispered one final thing to him. Smoke carries memory, and memory burns the hand that forgets. From that night on, Benjamin no longer smoked the scraps Whitlock threw away. He kept them, dried them, prayed over them, and when he rolled new cigars, he whispered words no one else could hear. By autumn, Whitlock began coughing. He blamed the cold, but the doctor's face paled when he saw the black veins around the man's lips. The tobacco was fresh, yet it carried the smell of something dead. In early November, Reverend Harlan rode in from town. He was tall, gaunt, his voice trembling with the kind of faith that hides fear. He came to bless the estate. Whitlock claimed the slaves were acting strange. They sang hymns in broken Latin, whispered over the tobacco rows, and refused to meet his eyes. Benjamin was among them, his expression calm but distant. When the Reverend sprinkled holy water on the smokehouse door, the droplets sizzled as if falling on hot coals. Sulfur, he muttered, rot beneath the soil. Whitlock laughed, offered him a cigar, and lit it with the same match he used to sign bills of sale. The Reverend took one puff, coughed violently, and dropped it. I've tasted ash before, Mr. Whitlock, he said, clutching his chest, but never from the living. That night the Reverend packed his carriage and left before dawn, whispering scripture under his breath. He would never preach again. Whitlock called it nonsense, northern superstition. But Benjamin stood at the window, watching the Reverend's carriage disappear down the road. For the first time, he smiled. November 8, 1860. The world outside boiled with tension. South Carolina prepared to secede, and Whitlock invited his friends, planters, officers, local politicians, for a night of cigars, brandy, and victory speeches. They toasted to the old order, to states' rights, to the promise that nothing would ever change. Benjamin served each man in silence, setting cigars into crystal trays, trimming the ends with ritual precision. The men joked about his stillness, calling him mute. Whitlock laughed the loudest, but when Benjamin handed his master the final cigar, darker than the rest, wrapped tighter, Whitlock paused. "This one looks different." Benjamin met his eyes for the first time. "It's for remembrance, sir." The words froze the room. No one had ever heard him speak. Moments later, Whitlock struck a match. The cigar hissed like breath exhaled from a grave. Outside, thunder rolled. Inside, the air thickened with a strange sweetness. One by one, the candles began to die. The first to cough was Colonel Avery, a loyal friend of Whitlock's. He had barely finished his toast when blood stained his napkin. Laughter fell silent. The fire snapped. The cigar in Whitlock's hand burned too slowly, its smoke thick, heavy, and bitter like tar. "Cheap tobacco," one guest muttered, but Benjamin's gaze didn't move. He stood by the wall, eyes reflecting candlelight like an animal watching its hunter grow weak. Within minutes, 2 men fainted. Another shouted for air, stumbling toward the window only to collapse before reaching it. Whitlock staggered to his feet, veins pulsing dark under his skin. What have you done?" he rasped. Benjamin didn't answer. He stepped forward, calm, collected, his hands steady as if serving supper. Then he whispered a single word. Low, rhythmic, not English, not any tongue the men knew. Smoke began seeping from Whitlock's mouth, curling like fingers. The guests screamed, chairs overturned, glass shattered. But Benjamin kept whispering, his face expressionless as the master fell to his knees. When the last breath left Whitlock's lungs, it rose in a swirl of gray, twisting into a form like a serpent devouring its own tail, just as the parchment had shown. And then, the room caught fire. The blaze should have spread outward, devouring wood and drapery first, but it burned inward, collapsing walls toward the parlor as though drawn to a single breath. Witnesses claimed the fire hummed, a low vibration like the droning of bees or distant chanting. Those who ran from the house said the smoke carried faces, flickering in and out of shape. By dawn, only the foundation remained. No trace of Whitlock or his guests, just 7 cigars unburned, resting neatly where the parlor had been. The overseer swore he saw Benjamin walking toward the river before the blaze reached the roof. Some said he carried something wrapped in cloth. Others said he vanished into the smoke. When the sheriff arrived, he found a message carved into the doorframe of the smokehouse. Memory is a flame that does not die. They called it witchcraft. They called it slave rebellion. But the townspeople whispered of something older, something that lived in the breath of tobacco, waiting to be exhaled by guilty men. The Whitlock family name was never spoken in Charleston again. Months later, Eleanor Whitlock, the master's widow, returned from Savannah. She found nothing but ashes and rumors. The townsfolk avoided her carriage. Even the church refused her donations. She rebuilt the house on the same foundation against all warnings. She said she could still smell him there, that the smoke had a voice she recognized. Every night she lit a single cigar in the new parlor, insisting her husband spoke through the flame. Servants heard her arguing with someone unseen, pleading, sobbing, laughing, then came the coughing. By spring her skin turned sallow, her breath reeked of burnt sugar. One morning the servants found her dead in the same chair where Edmund had perished, 7 cigars on her lap, and carved into the table before her, "The debt remembers." The housekeeper fled that night. She claimed that as she ran she saw a figure standing at the window, a man with eyes like burning paper. smiling through the smoke. By 1863, the war raged on and the Whitlock estate was abandoned. Union soldiers later discovered it and used it as a temporary camp. The men joked about ghosts, about cursed cigars. But one night, a private lit one he found in an old tin box beneath the floorboards. He didn't finish it. In the morning his lips were blackened and his lungs filled with ash. The officer in charge, Captain Harlan, son of the same reverend who'd fled years earlier, ordered the estate sealed and burned again. But when they tried, the fire refused to catch. Smoke filled the air anyway, though no flame burned. It clung to their uniforms for weeks, followed them north, hung over their tents like a warning. Years later, in his diary, Harlan wrote, "The air around Whitlock's land was thick with memory, and memory was alive." After the war, Charleston rebuilt itself in fragments. Streets renamed, families scattered, churches reconsecrated. But no one rebuilt near the Whitlock grounds. Children were told not to wander there, not to pick up anything buried in the soil. Old men spat before speaking the name Benjamin. New owner came in 1871, a railroad investor from Baltimore named Mr. Parrish. He laughed at the superstitions and built a school for orphaned boys on the ruins. They said it was charity, but the land didn't forget. Within months, teachers reported nightmares, boys coughing in their sleep, drawings of smoke and serpents scratched into dormitory walls. One child, a mute boy, was found in the cellar, holding an unlit cigar. When asked where he got it, he pointed to the floorboards and whispered his first and only word, "Benjamin." The school closed within the year, and once again, the house stood empty, its windows breathing faint wisps of smoke whenever the wind turned east. In 1927, historian Dr. Miriam Calhoun arrived in Charleston to research forgotten Southern plantations. She was young, skeptical, armed with ledgers and field notes, not faith. Locals told her never to visit the Whitlock ruins, but the forbidden always draws the learned. She walked through the overgrown gates, vines climbing the remains of the foundation. Beneath the rubble, she found bricks blackened from the inside as though burned by trapped breath. In the cellar, she discovered a sealed tin box, preserved from the flames. Inside lay a parchment, the serpent symbol, and a bundle of dried cigars bound with thread made from hair. That night she dreamed of a man humming by candlelight, rolling tobacco with trembling hands. His eyes were hollow yet alive. When he looked at her, she woke choking on the taste of smoke. Still, she returned the next morning. Some truths refused to stay buried. In the Charleston archives, Calhoun uncovered the Whitlock plantation's final ledger. The handwriting grew erratic near the end, records of strange losses, spoiled crop, rotted shipment, workers fainting in the sheds. The last entry read only, November 8th, election night. The air itself betrays me. Folded between the pages was a smaller note, written in another hand, rough but deliberate. Smoke is memory. And memory hungers. The ink wasn't black. It was brown, thick and flaked like old blood. When she returned to her boarding house, the smell of tobacco filled her room. No one in the building smoked. She began to write a paper titled, The Folklore of Southern Guilt. But her words felt guided, as though someone else pressed her hand. A month later, Calhoun visited an antique shop downtown. In a cracked frame among Civil War relics, she found a faded photograph labeled, Whitlock Estate 1859. It showed the master and his guests on the veranda. In the far background stood the servants, faces blurred by sunlight. All except one, a tall man, eyes fixed directly at the camera, his face eerily clear, though the photo was decades old. Benjamin. The shopkeeper claimed the photograph had been found inside a soldier's Bible in 1865. He laughed when she asked about the others in the image. Funny thing, he said. Everyone in that picture died by fire, except him. Calhoun bought the photo, but the next morning, Benjamin's face was missing, replaced by a faint plume of smoke spreading across the glass. She began corresponding with the University of Virginia about her research. In one unfinished letter found later among her belongings, she wrote, "There is an intelligence in the smoke. It lingers where injustice was done. It does not forgive. It waits." She confessed to lighting one of the cigars she'd found. "For study," she said. She described a smell like time rotting. She heard voices, chains dragging, hymns half-sung, laughter warped by flame. She tried to destroy the cigars afterward, but each morning one reappeared on her desk. On the last page, her handwriting broke off mid-sentence. The room smelled of burnt paper when the landlord found her. No body, just the photo, the parchment, and a single word scrawled on the wall. Remember. In 1946, a curator named Samuel Harlan, grandson of the Reverend, discovered Calhoun's notes in a university archive. He recognized his family name in the accounts and felt a cold dread. His grandfather had called it the Devil's Smoke. Samuel kept one page from her notes for himself, the one describing Benjamin's ritual. That night, the fire alarm in the archives went off, though no flame was found. Every book on the Whitlock family was burned from the inside, spines intact, pages turned to ash. In his report, Samuel wrote, "It's not a haunting, it's a harvest." He sealed Calhoun's papers in a locked drawer and left Charleston. He never spoke of it again. In 1951, a small museum in Columbia exhibited artifacts of the antebellum South. Among the items, a charred chair, a burned ledger, and a single preserved cigar labeled "recovered from the Whitlock fire." Visitors complained of headaches, coughing and fainting near the display. Staff noticed a haze in the air that wouldn't clear no matter the ventilation. After a week, the cigar went missing. The glass case was found cracked from the inside. A night guard quit after claiming he saw a man standing in the reflection. Dark skin, eyes like burning coal, smoke rising from his shoulders. The exhibit closed permanently. The remaining artifacts were lost in storage. But museum records show that one item, labeled Diary 1860B, was never officially logged out. In the early 2000s, developers purchased the old Whitlock land to build luxury homes. During excavation, workers uncovered bricks, scorched artifacts, and the remnants of a smokehouse. One laborer found a rusted tin box and, thinking it worthless, threw it into a bonfire at the site. Within an hour, the fire spread across 3 lots. Witnesses described it burning blue, unnatural, whispering like 1,000 voices. Investigators blamed leaking gas. But every photo taken that day showed faint trails of smoke forming a single face above the flames. The project was abandoned. Locals call the area Ashfield now. Grass grows in patches. Nothing else takes root. A century after the fire, a young filmmaker from Atlanta stumbled upon Calhoun's letters in the archives. He set out to film a short documentary about the Whitlock curse. He recorded interviews, drone footage, and voiceovers on the property. On the final night of shooting, he lit a cigar for effect on camera. The footage shows him exhale once, smile, and then freeze. Smoke surrounds him. His mouth opens and another voice comes out. Not his. Low. Calm. Memory burns the hand that forgets. The camera drops. The next morning, the crew found nothing but ash where he had stood. The footage still circulates online under the title, Election Night. Every generation of Whitlock blood, what little remains, has died in fire or illness of the lungs. Doctors can't explain the pattern. But one descendant, a pastor in Louisiana, confessed on record, "I stopped lighting candles years ago. The flame talks." He described dreams of a man standing at the edge of his bed, humming softly, rolling tobacco between his palms. When he wakes, his room smells of smoke, and every mirror shows the same figure standing just behind him. History calls it a legend, superstition, a ghost story born of guilt. But sometimes the air in Charleston still turns thick and sweet near the old Whitlock land. At dusk, the wind carries the faint hum of a man's voice. A work song, slow and steady. And if you light a cigar there, some say you'll see him, Benjamin, standing in the smoke, watching, waiting. He doesn't haunt for vengeance anymore. He haunts for remembrance, because smoke, like memory, does not die. It only changes shape. And on nights when the air is still, when the stars seem dimmer and the past feels too close, you might hear a whisper just beyond the breath of your flame. The master's gone, but the debt still burns.